Anyway, thank you for coming out here this evening in such good numbers as well, particularly given the very short notice of the meeting. Short notice because we wanted to make sure that we invited people to come and hear about this planning application, leaving you then plenty of time in which to be able to make comment on it for the planning committee. Just to clear up one thing first, the council has two roles in this particular planning application. The reason it has two roles is that the council is the landlord of the site. So Fareham Borough Council owns Daedalus. It owns something like 85% of the entire Daedalus site as landlord. But the planning application, where the council looks after a planning application, it's in terms of its role as local planning authority. So it is two very distinct roles. So in our role as landlord of the site, we have agreed that we are minded to allow National Grid to lease 10 acres of the Daedalus site, but with a lot of provisos. The most important proviso is that they're able to obtain a planning consent from the planning authority, and also there are a whole string of other issues as well, such that we would not wish to see anything happening to our airfield which would in any way work contrary to the good running of the airfield and be in any way negative or have a negative effect on the running of the airfield. So it's not that it doesn't have any effect at all, it is that we don't want anything to happen there which is likely to have a negative effect. Because clearly we own it, we own an airport, we don't want to see something happening on the site which is going to be detrimental to that. So that's our position as landlord, but the planning authority's position is entirely different. When the planning committee sits to consider the officer's recommendation, they are looking at it, and quite rightly, because they are acting in a quasi-judicial capacity in exactly the same way that magistrates would act, they have to look at it with no predetermination whatsoever, and if they did, they could end up in very serious trouble. So the 9 councillors that sit on the planning committee, they need to look at the evidence, they need to consider certain planning issues, they need to consider any deputations which are made to them, any letters or comments which have come in, they need to consider the officer's report and recommendation, and then they need to consider the debate that they then have. As I say, they sit totally separately from the council in its role as landlord. So Fareham has now received a planning application from the National Grid, which came in just a few days ago in respect of their planned energy infrastructure project, which we know as IFA2. What they're actually looking for, and Mark Wyatt, who is the planning officer who will be dealing with the application, will go through it in some detail with you in a few moments, but essentially what they're looking for, at Daedalus, they're looking for outline planning permission for the erection of converter station buildings up to 22 metres high, with access roads, security fencing, landscaping and temporary construction compounds. And they're also, as part of that application, seeking to create public open space and associated facilities, grassland planting and tree planting. So that's an outline application. So the planning application doesn't have in it what does the building look like. That would be a matter for a detailed planning application later. What it's looking at is the principle of siting a building of up to 22 metres high on the site. So that's the outline planning application, but at the same time they've also submitted full planning applications for 2 other matters. So that means that all of the details are within those applications. One of them is for installation of cables between the mean low water springs and the converter station, which would be in the northeastern corner of Daedalus Airfield. So that's there in all detail. And then for chilling in Warsash, they're looking at, with full planning application again, for the installation of cables between mean low water springs and the existing cable ceiling end compound, so that's really the joint to the National Grid. So it's where you join the national grid in Chilling Lane that they're looking to do what they need to make those cables connect, and that needs a smallish building there as well. In terms of all the cabling which goes underwater, and that's 120 odd miles of it coming from France to Fareham, that's not looked after by Fareham Borough Council, that's looked after by the Marine Management Organisation, and the MMO will deal with any application for subsea cabling. And then the only other bit I'm going to cover is what are the planning issues that the planning committee will be looking at. And what they will be looking at, and these are planning matters, so it means they're all relevant, the effect on the landscape and views, the effect on ecology, especially the coastline, noise, vibration, impact on the airfield, any potential health impacts, and any potential electromagnetic field impacts. And then finally, just a little bit about what the interconnection France-Angleterre is. What it will do, if it's built, it will link the United Kingdom's electricity network to France. It will provide enough electricity coming through it. It doesn't generate electricity, but it will provide enough electricity to power around 1 million homes. And the interconnector will be made up of undersea cables, which are planted at about 1.5 metres below the seabed, running for over 100 miles between France and Fareham. And they would connect at either end to a converter station. And the interconnector would link to the electricity network at a replacement substation building at the existing National Grid site near Chilling at Warsash. So that's very, very basically what it's about. And I'm going to ask Mark to come forward, and he's going to talk through in some detail what it is. Now the officers have had a week or so to look at the paperwork that's been deposited at the council, and then after Mark has finished, then we'll move to any questions that anybody would like to ask. So over to you.